Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Quite a weekend. I was at not one but two weddings, one in my hometown of Philadelphia and one here where I live now in Texas. So a lot of celebrating in a good way to two great couples getting married, but there is a continued marriage in a very negative way among Iran and Hezbollah, and they're doing this along secret smuggling routes near the Lebanon-Syria border. And again, that's a marriage that's been heading for a divorce, actually, Iran and its proxies, but not by their choice. Iran has tried to bolster that ring of fire at every turn, but it's been unraveling before their very eyes over the past really 2 months in particular, but certainly since October 7th, when Israel has struck heavy blows against Hamas and Hezbollah, who are the crown jewels, especially Hezbollah, of that Iranian ring of fire. And yet, I've said many times that evil is arrogant, evil is quite stupid at many times, and evil is relentless, because in this case, it is certainly driven by a demonic, and I do mean demonic, obsession to destroy Israel. And that's why Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, well, in this case, Iran and Hezbollah in particular, they've been hit and hit hard continuously by the IDF, yet they keep coming because they're evil. And again, this is a demonically obsessive death cult that seeks the genocide of Israel and the Jewish people, which brings us to the big story today. From the Israel Defense Forces, here it is, cleared for publication. According to the IDF has struck top secret Iranian smuggling routes. A good way to start your week, right? Because for years, and I mean years, the Iranian regime has been using smuggling routes, these very smuggling routes leading from Syria into Lebanon to supply Hezbollah with advanced arms, increasingly advanced arms, to be used to destroy and attack Israel. So it's very important that the IDF is getting a handle on this and striking those smuggling routes. Here's more. For decades, Iran has been supplying Hezbollah with weapons through covert smuggling routes going through Syria with the cooperation of Syrian authorities. Key point there, the Assad regime is complicit. These routes, managed by Hezbollah's Unit 4400, involve storing thousands of missiles and other weapons components in Syrian military warehouses and transferring them through internal crossings. So again, they're storing these weapons in Syrian military warehouses. You see the full complicity of the Assad regime, and you wonder why people ask me about Isaiah 17, that prophetic passage in the Bible which talks about the coming demise of the Syrian capital of Damascus. More on that in a minute. The IDF has conducted extensive operations to disrupt these efforts by targeting key smuggling routes used to arm Hezbollah, preventing future attacks on Israeli civilians. And the IDF is committed to countering Iran's efforts to arm its proxies in the region. Okay, here's more from the Times of Israel today. 1 second, just reading this straight off my phone. The Hezbollah Unit 4400, as we mentioned, responsible for smuggling weapons from Iran, was targeted in strikes against 12, count them, folks, 12 Hezbollah command centers in Beirut's southern suburbs, which is a Hezbollah stronghold, just a few hours ago. According to the IDF, the command rooms belong to Hezbollah's intelligence division, Coast to Sea Missile Unit, and Unit 4400. There they are again. The latter of which is tasked with delivering weapons from Iran to Lebanon. The Hezbollah sites were located in, quote, the heart of a civilian population. Very nice. Once again, Hezbollah and Iran using civilians as human shields. Before the strikes, the IDF, very much unlike Hezbollah and Iran, issued evacuation orders for the areas where these weapons were located and where, again, people were living. And this is willful and intentional, that the Iranian regime and its proxies place these weapons stockpiles in civilian areas. Why? Not because Israel is a war criminal, but because Israel is exactly the opposite, in that Israel goes to extraordinary lengths, sometimes jeopardizing its own troops to avoid civilian casualties in enemy nations. We see this script again and again. But this transit route from Iran into Lebanese territory, this is big because look, Israel for, gosh, over 10 years now. There's no doubt we've been talking about this for over 10 years. Remember, March 2011, that Syrian civil war broke out, and Israel has been striking in Syria since shortly after that. Why? Not because Israel has expansionist aims or wants to, but because if Israel does not, these smuggling routes that we're talking about will take permanent root, and Hezbollah will be supplied with highly advanced weapons that it can use to attack the Jewish state. This is not brain surgery. This is not brain surgery, folks. So Israel's doing what it needs to do. And this is another heavy blow against Iran because these routes, which were struck today, were crucial for Iran's smuggling network, no doubt. We're going to break this down more, the significance of it, number one. And number two, Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's Supreme Leader, calling for the execution of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And his motivation for doing that? The International Criminal Court. Remember, last week here in the live stream, we discussed this ICC edict calling for or demanding the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Well, Iran is piggybacking off that, and Khamenei is saying not only should these Israeli officials be arrested, they should be executed. So we'll talk more about that as well. Every time these global bodies show this anti-Israel madness and bias, and the West caves right into it and appeases them, it emboldens the enemies of Israel and the West. It never fails. So now we have Khamenei calling for an execution warrant, a statement of execution against Netanyahu. We're going to break that down as well. And is there a ceasefire coming in Lebanon? We're talking about the smuggling routes being hit by the IDF. Is there a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah coming after months of war? And really, when Israel has its boot on Hezbollah's neck, and I believe should not let them up, there's talk of a ceasefire, folks, being announced as early as tomorrow, Tuesday, November 26th. Before we get into that, what do you think of that? Look, Israel has struck heavy blows against Hezbollah, severely weakened Hezbollah. Hezbollah will never again be what it was before September 17th, 2024. That was the day where Operation Exploding Pager, as we've called it, commenced. And Israel upped the ante, no doubt. They carry out the pager attack. They take out the entire leadership of Hezbollah's elite Radwan military unit. They take out Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. They take out his replacement. They take out his replacement's replacement. Then they invade Lebanon on the ground. Hezbollah is still reeling, and they've never recovered. But they're still a lethal force, which over the past 24 hours has launched over 300 projectiles into Israel. Now, it's not the 3,000 that we expected they could once pull off before Israel again stepped up its operations, but they're lethal nonetheless still. A shell of what they were, but still very dangerous. But is this the time for a ceasefire? What do you think? Is Israel throwing a bone to Donald Trump before he takes office in January? We've got one of the most educated audiences out there, my watchmen and women on the wall. So in the chat, let me know what you think. Is it time for a ceasefire? We're going to break all this down more in a second. Before I do, quick reminder, if you are just joining us and you like what you're hearing, current events, breaking news from an unapologetically biblical perspective, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we're posting many times, at least 5 times a week and sometimes more. And it depends on the news cycle, and on the weekends we're posting as well. So a lot happening in the world's most chaotic region, and we're breaking down why it impacts you no matter where you live. So be sure to subscribe. Also, we've got a great partner today for today's live stream, our good friends at Maypanim. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, you know 2 things. Number one, there's a handful of organizations that we work with regularly here in the live stream. And number 2, Maypanim is one of them. And we only work with organizations that support the cause of Israel and are doing God's work. And Maypanim checks both boxes and then some, and then some. Look, you've seen over the past few years me on the ground at Maypanim soup kitchens in Israel, where Maypanim quite literally is feeding, clothing Israel's most vulnerable, its most needy, homeless, Holocaust survivors. Maypanim is there fulfilling that biblical mandate laid out in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 3, to bless the people of Israel. Well, here is Maypanim's latest campaign that I think you will really want to get on board with, very much so. And I've got some particulars here because it's going deeper this time. Israel's north is under attack, and we've been talking about this Hezbollah, and the support is urgently needed for Maypanim. Life-saving critical gear. Again, this is israelcharity.org. That's israelcharity.org to support Maypanim's important work. Here's what your support is making possible when you stand with Maypanim. Life-saving critical gear and food for over 20,000 IDF soldiers defending Israel's borders. Daily support and hot meals for 2,200 Holocaust survivors, and thousands of meals and aid for displaced and poverty-stricken Israeli families. And this is all coming as Hanukkah is coming. Look, in about a month. And there will be many in Israel who will not be able to celebrate Hanukkah in the way they should be able to celebrate it, with joy and with abundance. There's real issues now with the war on two fronts, in the north and the south. And again, Maypanim stepping up to the plate, israelcharity.org. Folks, this is a great organization that I've worked with for years. I know the leadership personally. I've been in there. It's not just a soup kitchen off some beaten path. This is high quality, beautiful facilities with great meals, and they are blessing so many in Israel, Israel's most vulnerable. So stand with Maypanim for such a time as this. You will not regret it. We are honored to partner with them here on the Watchman live stream. It is not a very honorable thing for Iran, on the other hand, to continue to funnel weapons into the hands of Hezbollah. Now, in particular, two things happening here over the years that have made it necessary, very necessary, for Israel to strike in Syria. Number one, Iran and its proxies' continued attempts to establish a beachhead, to establish a permanent foothold along Syria's border with Israel, the Golan side, or I'm sorry, the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, that strategic mountainous region that straddles the Israel-Syria border. So Israel said, non-starter, we're not going to let you do it. They've pushed Iran, Hezbollah, and their allies back from that border, because really what they want to do is duplicate what they were able to do in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, with Hezbollah. Israel says, no, we can't have it. So we're not going to allow it. So that's number one. Number two, the weapon shipments, in particular, precision-guided munitions. They do exactly what their name says. They're designed to hit the target with precision. Israel says we can't have it. We absolutely cannot have this. It's unacceptable. So we've got that. Two reasons why Israel has struck and struck hard time and time again in Syria. And Iran is the head of the snake. And this is no secret to anyone who watches this live stream on a regular basis. And Israel increasingly is saying enough is enough. Look, we've been striking in a more localized fashion, say in Lebanon, in Syria, but if Iran is the head of the snake, we have to go deeper. And if there's a weapons transit route from Iran into Lebanese territory, again, at Israel's northern doorstep, Israel's got to take it to the source. And these smuggling routes that Iran's been using for years have been secret, covert. Now they funnel weapons to Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, but Hezbollah is the crown jewel. And they have been able to, the Iranian regime, remember, Hezbollah was created by Iran way back in 1982. Iran spent 42 years building Hezbollah up into this formidable fighting force. 150,000 at least rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel, tens of thousands of well-trained foot soldiers, a network of terror tunnels, the list goes on. That's all been smashed in the past 2 months. 42 years of building it up only to see it basically, I don't want to say disappear because Hezbollah is still lethal and still dangerous, but man, oh man, taking very, very heavy blows over the past 2 months. So Iran sees its ring of fire unraveling. But the way they did this, the way they were able to build Hezbollah, a chief way, was through these smuggling routes. So this was very big that the IDF struck them. And why do you think, by the way, that Iran became so involved in Syria? Syria was indispensable in these smuggling routes. You couldn't get to Syria, I'm sorry, you couldn't get to Lebanon and Hezbollah unless you went through Syria. If you are Iran, you're obviously through the east. You got to go through Iraq and Syria en route to Lebanon. And if Syria was shut off during that Syrian civil war, if Assad lost, then Iran would have had just a very, very tough time, needless to say, in transiting weapons into the hands of Hezbollah. They would have to find some creative and unique ways. I guess they would have moved more to trying to supply them through the Mediterranean Sea. It would have been a lot more difficult for Iran to get Hezbollah those weapons. That's why Iran and Hezbollah went all in Syria backing Assad. And they were still getting thumped largely until Russia came to the rescue in September 2015. And the rest is history. And since then, Iran, Hezbollah, Assad, Russia have the upper hand clearly in Syria. And Assad has largely reasserted control thanks to his good buddies. But nonetheless, this is major news today, I believe, for those smuggling routes, because it's just one more sign as we hear rumblings of a ceasefire, perhaps in the offing, perhaps as soon as tomorrow. We see signs that Israel is getting some lethal licks in, so to speak, before anything becomes official, before a ceasefire becomes official. So this is very important. The steps that Israel is taking, look for over the next few days before the ceasefire. And again, it may be signed as early as tomorrow, but look for this, folks, to be a two-way street, where on one side, Israel is carrying out some really strong strikes against Hezbollah. And on the other side, we see Hezbollah trying to up its game, as we saw over the past 24 hours, as I mentioned, some 300, I think as many as 350 actually, projectiles launched by Hezbollah at Israel, northern and central Israel. So what they're trying to do is, before the final buzzer sounds and a ceasefire kicks in, and by the way, we will have more details in terms of the parameters of this ceasefire on tomorrow's live stream. But in the meantime, I don't want to get too deep into it because it's not official yet. It's still speculation, but there's a lot of speculation that, yeah, this may happen. But we'll break down the parameters more. But you see Israel and Hezbollah both trying to get their final blows in and kind of get their best possible positioning and leverage before the ceasefire takes effect. By the way, I interviewed just an hour ago Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of all British forces in Afghanistan, and really one of the world's foremost advocates for Israel. It will air tonight on my nightly show. You can see it on TBN. Yeah, we've got the YouTube channel, which is great. Over 1 million subscribers here. Hard to believe for such a time as this. But we've also got my nightly TV show every weeknight, Monday through Friday. It's called Stakelbeck Tonight. You can watch it on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network. We just launched in March 2024. And folks, it's going great. We're very, very busy here. But tonight, we have got great guests. We've got all the graphics and B-roll and bells and whistles you want that we can't always give you, obviously, on a live stream here. But you're here at the end of the day for the content, I know. But great content on Stacklebeck Tonight. This night, Monday, November 25th, Colonel Richard Kemp is with me. And he said, look, I would be hesitant if I was Israel to agree to a ceasefire right now with Hezbollah in Lebanon, because there is still much work to be done. And Hezbollah is reeling right now. Don't take your foot off their neck, was essentially his message. So we shall see. We'll know a lot more, I think, about that in the next 24 hours. But I think hitting those Iranian smuggling routes, the goal is that Hezbollah, if there's a ceasefire in the offing, the goal on Israel's side is, look, that Hezbollah cannot rebuild. And without those smuggling routes from Iran, they can't rebuild to the extent that they were once a very formidable foe. So this is significant by Israel, folks. Don't underestimate it. Speaking of significance, We talked last week. I'm just grabbing my phone here because I'm going to quote directly. We talked last week about the International Criminal Court. This was Thursday's live stream. By the way, if you miss any of our live streams, any of our content here on YouTube, just go to the archives right under newscast or videos. It's all right there. But have you heard about the International Criminal Court, the ICC for short? This is basically a global court whose headquarters is The Hague in the Netherlands. Some 124 countries are members to this International Criminal Court. Thankfully, the United States and Israel are not members of the ICC. They don't have to comply with any ICC rulings. And that's a good thing because last Thursday, the ICC issued arrest warrants, as I mentioned at the top, for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Now, significant in that much of the world seems to be on board with this, including Western leaders, including Justin Trudeau in Canada. Surprise, surprise there, right? We saw on Friday night in Montreal, pro-Hamas mobs rioting, setting things on fire, cars, stores, an effigy of Netanyahu, and attacking police. And where was Trudeau when this happened? No, really. He was at a Taylor Swift concert, and he was videotaped dancing and singing along at a Taylor Swift concert. This is a so-called world leader, folks. This is a fundamentally unserious person. And he issued a condemnation of anti-Semitism, of course, after the Montreal mayhem, in which, again, he was singing and dancing at a Taylor Swift concert. Very manly guy, this Justin Trudeau. And then on Saturday, there were more pro-Hamas demonstrations in Toronto, and Ezra Levant, who's a Jewish journalist for the Rebel News in Canada, he was there covering it, and the police arrested him for the mere fact that he was a visibly Jewish guy, visibly in terms of he said, hey, I'm Jewish, who was covering, he basically, his mere presence was inciting the crowd, the pro-Hamas mob, which is all about incitement, according to Canadian police, and he was led away in cuffs through the jeering crowd. This is Canada today under Justin Trudeau. What Canada today needs is what we just did in the United States. Voted out the radical left in resounding fashion. Canada needs that because Trudeau, they say weak men. We say here, certainly on live stream, weak men create hard times. And Canada is in for some hard times if this man stays in office. I can tell you that. I just, again, a fundamentally unserious person. And not only that, a radical leftist through and through, and a George Soros acolyte over the years. Enough said. But it's a world turned upside down there. And Trudeau, this ICC ruling, which charged Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant with war crimes, supposed, Trudeau said, yeah, you know what? We are a party to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And if Bibi or Gallant is on Canadian soil, well, we have no choice but to comply and arrest them. We respect international law, he says. He's really all about national sovereignty, or not. So he's vowing that, which is really not shocking, considering what a craven character he is, but I digress. Ireland as well. The UK sending out messages. They may comply with the ICC too. Thank God Hungary, Viktor Orban, and the Czech Republic said no way. The United States said no way. Biden, Harris, in their hearts, they'd probably love to, but they said no, we won't comply with it. And the Trump administration, clearly, when they get in office, a new sheriff in town, as I mentioned, they're talking already. The incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, congressman from Florida, former Green Beret, he's talking about sanctioning the ICC. It's music to my ears over this blatant, what a kangaroo court, blatant anti-Semitic diatribe against Israel. So now Bibi and Yoav Gallant have to be careful when they travel. I don't think there's any other way to say it. And one reason for that is now direct threats from Iran's Supreme Leader. Here's more. Emboldened by the ICC's ruling. Number one, just as those Montreal rioters Friday night Now, Trudeau on Thursday made his statement that, look, we have to comply with the ICC. Is it any coincidence that one night later, these pro-Hamas mobs went on a rampage? They're thinking, hey, the prime minister doesn't care. He's against Israel too. He said he'd arrest the prime minister of Israel. And same with this ICC ruling. It emboldened Iran. Here's Khamenei, the Supreme Leader of Iran. And I quote from Iran International. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei said on Monday, today, that the world's top court, the ICC, the world's top court, that's all relative, should have sentenced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to death for war crimes. Issuing an arrest warrant is not enough, Khamenei said. A death sentence for Netanyahu should be issued. The ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, issued arrest warrants on November 21st for Bibi, Gallant, and Mohammed Deif, the Hamas military leader who is dead. Wow, is that your way of showing you're even-handed to issue an arrest warrant for a corpse? I suppose so. War crimes, crimes against humanity. That's a charge against Bibi and Gallant over their conduct and their direction of the war against Hamas terrorists in Gaza since October 7th, 2023. Again, we live in a world turned upside down, where good is called evil and evil is called good. Now, Ayatollah Khamenei just called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be executed. He has spent the better part of, 45 years murdering and slaughtering his own people in Iran. The Iranian people are the biggest victims of the regime, and murdering and slaughtering across the region, across the Middle East, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Gaza, Lebanon. Folks, what's the common denominator? In every nation where Iran has its claws, the common denominator, again, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Gaza, the common denominator is misery, death, violence, poverty. And again, misery is the best way to describe it. This is a demonic, wicked regime that brings misery along wherever it goes. That is the common denominator. And yet, the International Criminal Court has never issued any sort of arrest warrant for any Iranian leader that I know of. What about Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed terror master who President Trump took out in January 2020? No. Israel and a democratically elected leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel charged. It's a sign of the times in a prophetic sense. I mentioned Isaiah 17 earlier. What's happening in Syria is a sign of the times. Certainly, in a prophetic sense, the Bible times we're living in. And look, I think of the book of Zechariah, chapter 12. This should not surprise you. And it should not, although it's disheartening and dismaying to see Western leaders and Western nations pile on and say, yeah, ICC, we've got your back against Israel. And that's so disheartening because Israel is fighting the good fight for all of us, for the free world. These nations and their leaders, so-called leaders, should be thanking Israel because the same radical forces that Israel is smashing right now in the heart of the Middle East, in its own backyard, those same radical forces have a bullseye on the back of the West. This is madness, suicidal, moral depravity. Not just moral relativism, which we've got in spades here in the West. This is moral depravity. This is Isaiah. This is Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20. This is calling evil good and good evil. What the ICC is doing here is evil. Yet Western leaders are essentially, by saying they'll go along with it, they're calling it good. And they're calling good Israel evil. And you don't think you live in Bible times? Is there any question? Look for this to intensify. I mentioned Zechariah chapter 12, where Jerusalem, the ancient and ancestral capital of Israel and the Jewish people, will become, according to the prophet Zechariah, God speaking through him, like a burdensome stone. And all nations that come against it will be cut to pieces. And every nation will. Who doesn't covet Jerusalem? Radical Islam obviously covets it. Erdogan in Turkey rails about it. The Iranian Ayatollahs rail about Jerusalem. Hamas, the October 7th invasion and subsequent war, they called it Al-Aqsa flood, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which sits atop the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Hezbollah, every time a Hezbollah jihadi is killed, they say that he was killed on the road to Jerusalem, martyred on the road to Jerusalem. For radical Islam, folks, at the end of the day, it's all about Jerusalem. They covet it. And what about the UN and these global bodies, the ICC, the ICJ, et cetera? They all want Jerusalem too. They don't have a religious motivation. They all just know they don't want the Jews to have it. So they want to divvy Jerusalem up, slice it up, and divide it once again. This is what you have. Radical Islam, the radical left, the globalists, they all want Jerusalem. Everyone wants it. But Israel has it, number one. And number two, at the end of the day, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, holds the title deed to Jerusalem. Folks, look for Jerusalem. I've been saying this to keep an eye on it, to become more and more the center of the world's attention in the days to come. Not only is Israel, look, if you look at the map, Israel is smack dab in the middle of the world. Jerusalem is the center of that center. None of this is a coincidence. It's the apple of God's eye, and it will increasingly be the prophetic center. Hey, look, Jesus is not returning to DC, Berlin, Moscow, London, Paris, or Tokyo. He's returning to Jerusalem as a conquering king the second go round. So be encouraged, because things will be set right. And I pray and hope that God is going to use certain people as vessels to help set things right. I hope Donald Trump is one of them. He takes office in January 20 to set things right here in the United States. And again, to be that new sheriff in town on the world stage and to put evil on notice. It's good when evil is on the run. Evil is on the run in America right now. I can tell you, folks, from living here, there's been a shift and a sea change since the election on November 5th, when evil, secularism, socialism, radical left-wing progressivism was repudiated loud and clear by the American people across all demographic, age groups, racial, etc. And evil has been on the run in the Middle East over the past several months, with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, all taking serious lumps at the hands of Israel. So let's keep the pressure on. If you're America, you're Israel, keep the pressure on. And in America, that's political, that means, in terms of getting the right people in the right positions and having the boldness to see things through for the new administration. In Israel, it's largely military, keeping that pressure on and weakening these evil demonic forces that are coming against you. Keep it all in prayer, because prayer works. And we're going to keep doing that right here on The Watchman. Thanks for joining us. Remember, Richard Kemp tonight on Stacklebeck, tonight on TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.